Welcome to the Marketing Execution Podcast. This is the show for tech founders and leaders building B2B products and technologies. We show you how to go further, faster to get the business results you need.
From strategies to big exec dreams, catch the buzz and join the execution. Marketing Convo.
In today's rapidly evolving tech landscape, every company from startups to established brands must embrace a technological mindset to thrive. Yet many overlook the pivotal role of product leadership in driving this change. Today, we're discussing how to empower product leaders to harness technology effectively, paving the way for sustained growth and innovation in your go-to-market strategy. You'll learn a proven framework for empowering your product teams. First, we'll cover how to foster a culture of ownership. Then we will discuss the process of setting clear objectives and key results. Finally, we will provide a step-by-step approach to building trust and collaboration within your teams. Drawing from my experience scaling several tech startups to over $500 million in revenue, we'll explore battle-tested strategies that deliver measurable results. Subscribe to the Marketing Execution Podcast for weekly insights on scaling tech companies with Tim and Lisa.
Hey there, ready to dive into something?
I'm ready. What are we diving into today?
Something that's pretty relevant to just about every business out there. We're talking empowered teams.
Empowered teams. Okay, I like it.
You know, those groups that just seem to get it when it comes to tech and innovation.
Right. They just seem to make it happen.
Our guide for this deep dive is Empowered.
Bye.
Marty, Cagan, and Chris Jones. And these aren't just some, random tech guys.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking Silicon Valley Product Group, eBay, Netscape. I mean, these guys have seen it all.
They've been around the block. So what's the big takeaway?
Well, one of the first things that really made me sit up and take notice was how they said every company today is essentially a tech company.
Whoa, every company. Really?
That's what I thought. Sounds extreme, right?
It does sound extreme. How can every company be a tech company?
Right. But they make a good point. It's not just about building software or anything. Think about it. Think about even a hair salon.
Okay, hair salon.
Online booking, digital payments, maybe even, targeted ads on social media.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It really got me thinking, how has tech become so essential, even in parts of our lives where it's not the main thing we do?
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's become so deeply intertwined, often without us even noticing.
Like you could.
Even something as simple as a car repair shop.
Right.
Needs to keep up with computerized systems in vehicles, cybersecurity, AI integrations, customer relationship platforms.
It's mind-blowing.
Suddenly, every business is dealing with tech on multiple levels.
In Cagan and Jones, they argue that this is only going to get more intense, this constant need to innovate, to keep up with the shorter product cycles. It's only going to push tech adoption even further.
Oh, absolutely. It's not slowing down anytime soon.
But then the question is, how do companies avoid letting tech dictate their direction instead of serving their goals?
That's where the human element comes in. It's not just about adopting every new technology. It's about strategically leveraging technology to achieve your specific business goals.
Okay, so be strategic, but how?
You need the right people in place. That's where this idea of product leaders comes into play.
And this isn't just your average manager role, right? These product leaders, as they describe them, are almost like coaches.
Exactly. They really emphasize that. Product leaders are there to guide, inspire, and create development plans for their teams.
I like that.
And a crucial element they highlight is embracing risk and viewing failure as an opportunity to learn and grow.
That really resonated with me. They argue that a product leader's success should be measured by the growth of their team, not just the success of the product itself.
Which makes a lot of sense.
It's about fostering a culture of continuous learning and improvement, which, when you think about it, it makes sense why they put so much emphasis on building the right team in the first place.
Right. The right team makes all the difference.
And they talk about hiring for passion and diversity of thought over just checking off boxes on a resume.
Because skills can be taught, but passion, that's got to come from within.
Exactly. One of the most surprising takeaways for me was how cultural fit can actually stifle innovation. They gave this example of a company that was so focused on hiring people who fit their existing culture.
Okay.
That they ended up with a team that was too homogenous in their thinking.
Everybody thought the same way.
Right. And as a result, They struggled to come up with fresh, innovative ideas.
Because they were missing out on those different perspectives, those outside-the-box ideas.
It really made me rethink my own approach to building teams, to be honest.
Yeah, it makes you realize that diversity isn't just a box to be checked. It's crucial for innovation.
So how do you go from simply having a team to having an empowered team? What makes them different?
It's about creating an environment where all those diverse perspectives can thrive. It's about giving those diverse teams ownership of their work. And I don't just mean throwing tasks at them and saying, figure it out. It's about setting clear objectives, but then giving them the freedom to determine the how.
Okay, so you set the what, but not the how. I like that. And mistakes are going to happen, right?
Absolutely. They're inevitable. But they should be viewed as valuable learning opportunities, not something to be feared.
Right. That makes sense. But it requires a certain level of trust from leadership, doesn't it?
Definitely. The book really stresses how critical it is for leaders to foster what they call psychological safety within teams.
Psychological safety. What's that?
It means creating a space where people feel comfortable taking risks, sharing their ideas, and even admitting mistakes without fear of punishment.
Oh, I get it. Like knowing it's okay to screw up as long as you learn from it.
Exactly. It's about creating that culture of learning and growth. And to help channel that experimentation, they introduce this whole concept of OKRs.
OKRs.
Objectives and key results.
Oh, right. OKRs. We use those at our company, but we don't always do it right.
Well, what I found interesting was their take on why OKRs are most effective when they're focused on the team level rather than just individual employees.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Right. The book touches on OKRs, but focuses on the often overlooked aspect of setting them at a team level.
And why is that so important?
This resonated with me because, in my experience, individual-focused OKRs can sometimes create unnecessary competition. Have you ever experienced that?
Absolutely. It creates that me versus them mentality instead of encouraging collaboration. How about you? Have you seen that happen with teams you've worked with?
Definitely, and it can be really detrimental to the overall success of the team. But when you set OKRs at the team level, it fosters a sense of shared responsibility.
So it's not just about individual goals. It's about working together toward a common objective. I like it.
It encourages everyone to work together.
Plus, it probably creates a more supportive environment for experimentation, right? And, well, failure.
Exactly. With team-focused OKRs, failure to meet an ambitious goal isn't seen as a personal failing. It's viewed as a valuable learning opportunity for the entire team.
And speaking of learning from failure, that's a recurring theme in Empowered. It's almost like they want you to mess up.
Well, not celebrate failure, but it's about recognizing that failure is just an inherent part of the innovation process.
Okay, so it's more about how you respond to failure than trying to avoid it altogether.
Precisely. And what I found really insightful was how they distinguish between, like, failing at something you were already aiming high for versus failing at something where you maybe underestimated the challenge or didn't quite grasp the problem.
That's interesting.
Both types of failure offer valuable lessons.
Okay, I see what you mean. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you have a team that's developing a brand new product.
Okay.
They're pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and they ultimately fall short of their goals. That's still a valuable learning experience because they've gained insights into what works, what doesn't, and where the limits are.
So in a way, it's almost like failure is expected, especially when you're pushing the boundaries and trying new things.
Exactly. And that ties back to the importance of that psychological safety that we were talking about earlier.
Right. If people are afraid to fail, they're less likely to take risks.
You got it. They're less likely to take risks and come up with truly innovative ideas.
They won't go out on a limb.
Exactly.
Which makes me think about that story they share in the book about a team at Netflix that completely bombed on a new feature.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
They put in all this work and it just totally flopped.
Ouch.
But instead of getting reprimanded, they were actually celebrated.
Celebrated. For failing.
For their willingness to try something new. And apparently, CEO Reed Hastings said, "We only celebrate our failures when we learn from them."
I love that.
It perfectly illustrates the kind of culture that Cagan and Jones are advocating for.
It's about embracing the learning process, even when it's messy.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about how every company's a tech company, the importance of product leaders as coaches, building empowered teams, and embracing failure as a learning opportunity.
And it all ties together, doesn't it?
It does. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we need to talk about how these empowered teams actually operate within a larger organization.
That's a really good point.
Because It's one thing to have a self-directed team, but how does that fit into the bigger picture?
Right. How do you make it all work together?
That's where it gets really interesting because you've got these teams used to like a high degree of autonomy, and then suddenly they're bumping up against, traditional hierarchy and bureaucracy.
Right. How does that work? It's tricky. Cagan and Jones, they don't shy away from those challenges at all. In fact, they dedicate a good portion of the book to navigating this whole thing, empowered teams within these existing structures.
Which is really helpful because, let's face it, most of us aren't starting from scratch here,
Exactly. And one concept they introduced that I found really helpful is this idea of team topologies.
Okay, I'll be honest. That term always sounded a bit intimidating to me, like something you need a spreadsheet and a bunch of flowcharts to figure out.
It sounds way more complicated than it is. Think of it as a way to just map out the different kinds of teams you have. You've got those focused on building new products. You've got those on the marketing side, those handling customer support. Each team has its own strengths, its own ways of working.
So you're not trying to force every team into the same mold.
Exactly. The goal is to define those roles and responsibilities in a way that minimizes dependencies.
So they're not stepping on each other's toes all the time.
Exactly. And it maximizes each team's autonomy.
Ah, okay. So it's kind of like creating a clear roadmap for how those teams should work together without, like I said, stepping on each other's toes.
But that's a great way to put it. And when it works well, it allows teams to really focus on what they do best while still staying aligned with the overall goals of the organization.
Right. Everybody's on the same page, but has the freedom to actually, do their thing. But how do you actually implement this kind of team topology? It seems like it could get messy pretty quickly if you're not careful.
It definitely requires a shift in mindset, both from, the leaders and the team members.
Okay, so what does that mean? How do you change a mindset?
Well, on the leadership side, they've got to be willing to give up some control.
Yeah, that's tough.
Right. And trust their teams to make decisions.
Which, let's be honest, can be a big ask for some leaders.
Absolutely. It's a control thing,
Right.
But at the same time, team members need to be ready to step up, take on more responsibility, be accountable for their work.
It's a two-way street, like most things.
It really is.
It's that whole ownership thing again, but on a whole new level. It's not just following orders anymore. You're responsible for the success of, your piece of the puzzle.
Precisely. And you can imagine that can be a big adjustment for some people. But the payoff, as Cagan and Jones argue, is well worth it.
What happens?
When you have teams that are truly empowered, you unlock this whole other level of creativity, innovation, and agility. It just wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Wow. Okay, so let's say you've got your team topology figured out and everyone's on board with this whole empowered team idea. What are some of the key practices that actually make this work on a day-to-day basis?
One of the most important, and this comes up again and again in the book, is clear and consistent communication.
Okay, communication.
And it's got to be more than just top-down communication.
Well, you mean like the boss just dictating everything?
Right. It needs to flow freely in all directions.
That makes sense because if teams are working more independently, they need to be on the same page about the big picture.
Exactly. Otherwise, it's just chaos. It's about creating this culture of transparency and open dialogue.
Where it's safe to, ask questions and stuff.
Exactly. Where it's okay to ask questions, challenge assumptions, maybe even disagree with each other.
Respectfully, of course.
Respectfully.
So it's not just about having those structures in place. It's about fostering the right kind of communication and collaboration.
Absolutely. And along with that comes another key practice, regular feedback and reflection.
So you don't just say, okay, we messed up, let's move on.
Right.
You got to take the time to actually analyze what worked, what didn't, and how to improve the next time around.
Exactly. They talk about something they call, get this, blameless postmortems.
Blameless postmortems. Okay, that sounds intense. What does that even mean?
So when a team encounters a failure or a setback, they don't waste time pointing fingers. Instead, they come together, figure out what happened, why it happened, and how to prevent it from happening again.
So it's about learning from the mistakes, not about assigning blame. I love that.
Right. It creates a much healthier and ultimately more productive environment.
Because if you're not afraid to make a mistake, you're probably going to be a little more adventurous.
When people aren't afraid to take risks and make mistakes, they're more likely to come up with truly groundbreaking ideas.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. It's like you were saying earlier about psychological safety. You have to create a space where it's okay to fail, as long as you learn from it.
Right. And I think that's a crucial point to emphasize here. Building and sustaining these empowered teams, it requires more than just a cool mission statement or a few team building exercises.
It's not just a box you can check off your list.
Definitely not. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about work, about leadership, about the role of the individual within an organization.
It's about trusting people to do their best work, giving them the freedom to experiment, and creating that environment where failure is seen as an opportunity for learning and growth, which is a lot to unpack and probably something our listeners are thinking about right now in terms of their own work. It really is like a whole new way of thinking about work, isn't it?
It's a huge shift.
And honestly, after reading this book, it's hard not to get a little inspired.
Right.
But it makes me wonder, like, why haven't more companies already embraced this?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think it's a complex answer. I mean, change is hard.
Oh, tell me about it.
Especially for large organizations,
Yeah.
there's going to be resistance to new ways of working.
There's comfort in the familiar.
Yeah.
Right. Even if it's not really working.
Exactly. It's like, this is how we've always done it. And on top of that, this whole idea of building these truly empowered teams, it requires a different kind of leadership.
What do you mean?
It takes courage to let go of some of that control, to embrace risk. And you know what's really hard for some leaders? Prioritizing the growth of the team over your own ego.
Letting go of that ego is tough.
It can be.
So it's almost like a paradox, isn't it? You need to be a strong leader to build a team that doesn't need you to constantly be in charge.
Exactly. But when it works, it creates this amazing positive feedback loop. Empowered teams, they create the space for stronger leadership, which in turn leads to, you guessed it, more empowered teams.
It's like this upward spiral
Exactly.
instead of that downward, micromanaging.
Right.
So it's really about shifting from a culture of command and control to a culture of trust.
And shared responsibility.
And honestly, after everything we've talked about today, it kind of seems like that's the only way forward,
Especially when you think about the challenges businesses are facing these days.
Right. Rapid technological advancements, global competition.
Everything's changing so fast.
You need teams that are adaptable, innovative, resilient. And you're not going to get that from a bunch of people who are too afraid to, make a move without permission.
Absolutely. Those qualities, they only thrive in environments where people feel empowered. Empowered to think creatively, to take ownership, and you know what? To learn from their mistakes.
So for our listeners out there who are like, okay, this all sounds great, but where do I even begin? How do I start building a more empowered team?
Well, lucky for us, Cagan and Jones, they tackle that head on in the book.
Okay.
They have a whole chapter dedicated to practical strategies for this. But if I had to distill it down to one key takeaway, it would be this: start small.
Don't try to boil the ocean, right?
Exactly. Don't boil the ocean. Choose one team, one project, one specific area where you can experiment with some of these principles.
Okay, I like it.
Give that team a little bit more autonomy, more ownership, more freedom to experiment.
And to fail.
And yes, even to fail. See what happens.
I love that. So it's about taking that data-driven approach to empowerment.
Exactly.
Try it out. See what works. Build from there.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Well said. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, is there one final thought, a question, anything to really get our listeners thinking about their own teams and their own leadership style that we can leave them with?
Ooh, that's a great challenge. Let me think. Okay, how about this? Think about the most innovative, the most engaged team you've ever been a part of. What was it about that team, about that environment, that really brought out the best in you and your colleagues?
Ooh, that is such a good question to ask yourself. It's about identifying those elements of empowerment that might already be present, even if we don't always recognize them, and then finding ways to amplify them. I bet there are a ton of aha moments waiting to be discovered with that question. This has been a fantastic deep dive. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, as always.
And to our listeners, if you're out there feeling inspired to explore this whole world of empowered teams, we would love to hear from you. Head over to our website or find us on social media, share your thoughts, share your own experiences. Who knows? We might even feature your story on an upcoming deep dive.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
The Marketing Execution Podcast is produced by Growth Stage Marketing. We are on a mission to see your company reach wild success using marketing pods.
Too big, accept dreams. Catch the buzz and join the execution. execution. Marketing Convo.
Thank you for listening and being a part of the marketing execution movement and community. To learn how growth stage marketing clients reach more buyers and drive business impact, go to growthstage.marketing. That's growthstage.marketing.